Hello, YouTube. So I want to think about the issue of feminism and censorship. I'm sort of on my day off, having a cigarette, having a cup of coffee. It's a little hot down here in Louisiana, but it's still a nice day. Good day for sitting outside and thinking about feminism and social justice in general and what that entails and how that works. I'm not an activist. I just want to make that clear. I'm not somebody who is under the illusion that making a YouTube video is going to instantiate some kind of social change or any substantive change, I guess. I don't really take the making of this video to be a political act. I'm just trying to think through, right? I'm just trying to work through concepts. I'm thinking very, very much about, I think, one of the core anti-feminist critiques or anti-social justice critiques that is leveraged that more and more on the internet. And that's that feminism, whatever that is, or feminists, we should say, want to censor you. And I think that this is a really interesting claim. It's an interesting claim because, I mean, I don't think it works as a criticism, actually. And I'm going to try and unpack why. But there's a kernel of truth in there, and I think that there is a danger. There are certain dangers that criticism touches. That I think that the activist community should have some anxiety about. Should be very careful about. I want to start off by saying, if I use the word censorship here, I don't want to imply a priori that censorship is bad. All I really mean by censorship is going to be the restriction of gestures, the restriction of language, the restriction of statements to some end, right? And I think that the project of social justice is actually engaged in censorship. And I think quite explicitly. Now, I, again, don't think that this is a terrible thing. I think that the word censorship is kind of a buzzword. It's a politically charged word that has sort of lost its meaning. And in some way, I would prefer to use a different word because I'm nervous that just using the word censorship is going to pollute people's reading of what I'm saying here. But I think that censorship is actually a very difficult question politically. If we take politics just to be the way that we organize societies, right, the way that we organize communities, then I think that the condition of possibility for anything like a community is going to be something like censorship. There are norms, right? There are things that you can say and can't say in various social spaces, and those don't necessarily have to be codified by some institution. It doesn't have to be a law. It doesn't have to be some policy with a threat of punishment from an institution. In order for there to be an element of censorship. I cannot go to a bar and just smash a pint glass on the bar, for instance, right? I mean, I guess I could, but there's going to be reprisals there. People will not take kindly to that. So that's an action that is excluded from the realm of social possibility in a bar setting. There are others as well, right? Again, to be a participant in a community is to have an implicit knowledge of what you can do, cannot do, what you can say, cannot say, where those lines are, how they can be pushed even, right? Without some level of knowledge there, you just can't organize any kind of social interaction. This is what I mean when I say that censorship is a condition of possibility for the social. In any setting, there are going to be, I mean, just specifically with language, there are going to be statements that are restricted. I imagine it would be extremely difficult to go into a public space and be very overtly and openly racist, for instance. There are going to be normative pressures, right? There's going to be, it's going to make your social world more difficult to inhabit. That is a form of censorship already, but it's implicit, right? It's not something that's made explicit. It's not something that's talked about in quite that way. And that interests me. So that's sort of the first kernel of what I think. I think that society is always going to be bound up with some collection of regulations and forms of censorship. And that's necessary, and it's not necessarily bad. Different communities, different societies are going to have different regulations in that way. So this is why, in some way, I don't understand the criticism of political correctness, quote unquote, or social justice or feminism or something, as being a movement that's trying to censor you, right? It's not like in your day-to-day life, in the various contexts that you inhabit socially, it's not like you're not censored. I mean, everybody clearly is, in all forms. So it shouldn't be a question of, I don't think it should be looked at as a question of censorship versus non-censorship. It should be looked at as what things are we going to censor and what things are we not going to censor. What things are we going to stand for and what things are we not going to stand for. So that idea, the idea that feminism is trying to censor, right? In some way I want to say, yeah, that's true, and that's not necessarily bad. I mean, feminism is trying to instantiate change in a society, and any sort of change in a society is going to entail something like censorship. Saying this thing was on the table, or it was possible, and now it's not, right? Or this thing was not possible and now it is, socially. Those are power gestures, and those are gestures that are going to entail elements of exclusion and, again, censorship. So I don't think that critique actually hits. It doesn't really make sense to me. That being said, I think that the social justice community, which I'm not really a part of, and maybe it's maybe I'm not the guy to talk about this because I'm looking at it with a bit of an anthropologist's eye, right? A bit of there's a distance between me and that community that might open up the space for critique. But I think it should be, I think that community, the social justice community, can be naive about this, right? If we talk about the construction of a safe space, for instance, I am all for safe spaces existing, particularly among the LGBT community, among the abused, among all sorts of marginalized and exploited people. Of course, such people should be able to spend time together and organize and have a place where they feel at home, and can sort of be open and be themselves. And so I think I'm totally in support of the idea of a safe space. At the same time, there is no such thing as a safe space without censorship and exclusion. That's what the word safe means. You have to be safe from certain things, and the things that you're trying to be safe from are going to be excluded and censored. And I think that calling that a safe space, quote unquote, is, I mean, it's a fine name. It's as good as any other name, I guess. But I think it's easy to talk about the construction of such spaces without having anxieties about how those modes of censorship and exclusion work. It may be the case that you can construct such a space with the best of intentions, and it can become something much more coercive than was intended, or even that one would think is possible. When we talk about, I mean, there was a big kerfuffle about a group of feminists a number of years ago trying to put in place various policies on the books for the organization of conventions. And that's not a bad project, I don't think. I'm not condemning it. But we should recognize that those policies that are there to exclude certain behaviors, certain ways of speaking again. And there's a danger in that, right? There's a danger that such a space can become coercive, and it can become insular, sort of hermetically sealed, and I don't know. There's even this is how, at its most extreme, right? Those kinds of mechanisms are how cults function, right? I don't mean to say that feminism is a cult, or that what they are doing is cultish behavior. I just mean to say that the trajectory of sort of consciously regulating language, it's on the same line. It's on the same trajectory. Cult behavior would be a pathological version of that, put it that way. Also, I mean, there's obvious Orwellian critiques to make in here. It is possible to be politically repressive with the best of intentions. So, and I think the only way that one can actually avoid those trappings is through the recognition that when a safe space is being constructed, it is being done through a series of power gestures whose aim is really to censor people. And I think that it should be thought about in those terms to produce anxiety, right? Anxiety is good. I think that there should be lots of hand-wringing when you start saying you can say this, you can't say that, right? And I think that there is an ease with which people within the social justice world do that. That's difficult for me to accept. It's something that has to be done, and it's something that I support. It's a project that I support. At the same time, I think that it's a politically dangerous game, and the non-recognition of that danger has all sorts of dangerous possibilities. And so that critique of the feminist thing, that they want to censor you, that's what I think it could touch on, or that's the direction I think it points to if it's really worked out in some kind of sober way. Again, I don't think the critique lands, but insofar as there are elements there that are salvageable, I think it just turns into a call for care and caution. We should be like constantly terrified, I think. We should look at these gestures in some way as necessary evils, rather than as being something unequivocally positive or something to be enthusiastic about. So I'm all for safe spaces, I'm all for the regulation of language for the sake of social justice, but, you know, we should be worried while we're doing that, I think. We should be careful, and we should handle these issues with the greatest delicacy possible. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's sort of the lines in which I'm thinking about this. Now, I'm, of course, always open for criticism, so post a comment below.